Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from Delta CX, and welcome to episode 231, where we're going to talk about a U.S. business tax law that appears to be responsible for some of the layoffs. Probably not all of them, but definitely some of them. I'm going to turn down my mic a little bit. Looks a little hot. So I'm going to be reading my article to you about this topic, and I'll be taking your questions, and we'll open it up for discussion. Of course, I am not a tax expert, so I'm not going to be able to know everything about everything. But when I first heard about this, I did a little digging. So my article is based on the things that I have learned. Alrighty. And as always, of course, thank you to our Patreons. These are our paid Patreons. You can also join for free, and that removes the algorithm between you and me. So come be the first to know special perks, special discounts, even for our free members. Patreon.com/CXCC. And of course, subscribe here on YouTube, CX-CC. So let me get my screen cooking, and then let's see. So this is the screen share where you get to see how the sausage is made, and then we'll jump over to the article. And of course, the chat room. There we go. So I think we're ready. So you can find this on Medium. It's also in the description. And so this is called a U.S. business tax law change that partially caused layoffs. And the name of the law is Section 174. And then I'll tell you what's going on with this law at the end of the article. U.S. corporate tax law is not an area of my expertise. Hi, Andre. But after reading an article, The Pulse, Will U.S. Companies Hire Fewer Engineers Due to Section 174? I started diving into the changes to Section 174. These changes were voted into law in 2017, signed by then-President Trump, and designed to be enacted in 2022. That's an interesting date, since in 2022, a different president would have potentially been in place, and it could look like this mess is theirs. These changes going into effect in 2022 also coincide with the waves of layoffs that we've seen. And from what I understand, part of the revised tax law changes how certain types of workers and expenses are written off on a business's taxes. The 2017 change to Section 174 redefines workers and expenses related to research, development, experimentation, innovation, and software. Let's call this R&D for short. If you're reading this, your job is probably in there. What do R&D expenses include? Labor costs, salaries, freelancers, consultants, agencies, and contractors. So again, start putting the pieces together, you critical thinkers, as I'm reading this to you. Think about how even agency work has dropped since 2022, and especially mid-2022. What other expenses are included in R&D? Materials and supplies cost. This even includes office supplies, pencils, patent costs. Anybody trying to innovate would want to file patents. This includes what you pay lawyers for patent-related work. Certain operation and management costs. This relates to facility and equipment costs such as rent, utilities, insurance, repairs and maintenance, security, cleaning, etc. And travel costs. Attending a conference, displaying your tech at a convention, need to go somewhere, anywhere? As you might notice, this appears to be nearly everything related to work being done around research, development, experimentation, innovation, and software. The redefinition has two main components that concern me and relate to the mass of lost jobs. 1. Salaries and expenses related to R&D must be amortized over 5 years. A worker who made X dollars in 2023 is normally a tax write-off for the business on 2023's taxes. Under the new rule, this worker is written off in small pieces over years. Number 2, foreign non-USA expenses, human and non-human, that related to R&D must be amortized over 15 years. The claim was that by giving businesses a smaller write-off for these workers, jobs would come back to America. We'll examine later in the article if this amortization is enough of an incentive to keep jobs in America or move jobs back to America. So, how will these be amortized? Give me 1 second to close Slack so it doesn't keep opening. There we go. So how will these expenses be amortized under this tax law change? Now, I've seen different information from different sources. Some say that the 5-year amortization for non-foreign expenses, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing amortization wrong. I am not an expert in this. Some say that the amortization for non-foreign expenses is 10% in year 1, 20% in years 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the remaining 10% in year 6. I saw another source that said, no, it's 10% per year for the first 5 years, and then 50% in year 6. But either way, it looks like the first year you can write off 10% of these expenses. So let's use an example. Example. A company pays an engineering team, so a bunch of people, $1 million in 2023. That's what they all get when you add up their salaries together. Under the old tax law, the company could write off $1 million as expenses on their 2023 taxes. That means they would spend $1 million, write off $1 million, and not pay taxes on that because there's no profit, at least for that piece of their revenue. But under the new tax law, they would only be able to write off $100,000 in that first year. So what? Why would that make companies lay people off? Well, let's pretend that you're an innovative, highly experimental startup, scale-up, or small business. You made $2 million in 2023. You paid $1 million in salaries, and you had another $1 million in rent, equipment, travel, and many things on the above list of expenses. Under the old tax law, these are all write-offs for 2023, and you might end up paying no taxes if you end up with no profit or you lost money. Imagine this under the new tax law. You made $2 million in revenue, but you can only write off $100,000, 10%, of your $1 million in salaries. Maybe you can only write off 10% of your other $1 million of expenses. All of a sudden, you're a company with no real profit and nothing in the bank, but you have $1.8 million of taxable revenue. You might owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, and you might not have money to cover that. This might not matter to the Microsofts and Googles, but to many small and medium businesses, especially those that are newer or were struggling through the pandemic, this change is devastating. You would need to cut your expenses, and fast. Two of the things probably costing your company the most are people, and if you're not embracing remote work, office space, and all of the expenses associated with it. Companies often look to human layoffs as a first and fast way to cut expenses. Using the previous example, if you can cut your salaries by 20%, you've made $2 million and you paid $800,000 in salaries. You write off 10% of that, $80,000, and 10% of your other $1 million in expenses, $100,000. You'll owe taxes on nearly $1.75 million. But hey, you have $200,000 in the bank to pay your taxes thanks to cutting one or more salaries. Maybe you cut half your workers and keep even more in the bank for the taxes. Maybe you end some contractors early and rehire for the same work at a lower pay. Maybe you think you can replace some people with AI. That's cheap and fast, though maybe not accurate or innovative. But why not, since it'll cut expenses and help you through this situation? The name of the game is to keep making the same revenue or more revenue while drastically cutting expenses so you have the money in the bank to pay these new, wildly higher taxes. Then I've got a screenshot from TechCrunch showing over 262,000 publicized tech layoffs month by month from January 2023 through January 2024, though we all know a lot of the layoffs started in 2022. So, why wouldn't a company just cut office expenses? Well, companies should cut office expenses. That would require re-embracing remote work and shifting away from the mostly disliked and not disability-friendly return to office RTO initiatives. People who want to move to less expensive places and not near the office will. Companies who wanted to pay less will. More people would be able to accept that lower pay if they wanted to, because they can make that money work given the potentially lower cost of living far from the office. Companies will then pay less for offices and related expenses, further helping them with this awful Section 174 situation. I'm for people being paid more. I don't want to see salaries and contractor pay cut. But since it's being cut anyway, my suggestion is to go back to embracing remote work, or as the Italians call it, smart working, which is actually two words. I wrote it as one. I think I just saw that Amazon is going to spend like $1 billion closing some of their offices and breaking some of their leases early just to get out of some of their office space. Is it related to this? They're not saying, but it sure could be. And they're willing to take the hit. They know it'll cost them less to get out of the office space than to keep the office space. So it's an interesting decision. Continuing with the article, why not cut CEO, executive, or board member pay? Another great question. Oh, someone on LinkedIn is saying hello, and I don't know who it is. Let's go over to LinkedIn. And it's not telling me who it is. All right, sorry, you'll have to say hi again. So as I was saying, why aren't we cutting high-level leadership pay? If your average tech worker is paid 150,000 American dollars a year, and you want to cut, let's say, millions of dollars, which is better in the short and long term? Cut 500 workers you probably really need, people who were overworked and hoping you'd hire more people to help them, or cut millions from C-level execs and others, some would say should be showing their leadership through a voluntary pay cut. Hi, Pradyot. If times are tough enough to have layoffs, leaders should be cutting their pay by millions. Need to cut lots of expenses, but still need people to work on your mission-critical projects? Consider cutting C-level pay first. We must also consider the long-term consequences. When we lay people off while companies are doing well, and execs aren't cutting their pay much or at all, we teach workers that they're expendable and replaceable. We teach them that we will cut them at a moment's notice for good, bad, transparent, or deceptive reasons. Few companies announced that layoffs had anything to do with the new Section 174 tax law changes. Many companies announced layoffs not because they were struggling or in trouble. Many announced that they were doing great but needed to rethink the future. Some claimed they overhired, even though laid off workers had no clue that their jobs or work were unimportant or unnecessary. Many of those projects continue, dumped on already overworked people. We probably didn't really overhire, unless you define overhiring as hiring more people than our accountants recommended once they thought about the new Section 174 and what our tax burden would look like. Companies are already badly affected by this law, so badly that as of when I'm writing this in February 2024 and reading it to you in April 2024, Congress in the USA is considering a law to postpone the new Section 174 changes for Americans, but not the part for foreigners, until 2026. I'm not sure how you postpone something that's already happening, but we'll have to watch how this plays out. Some people thought that the layoffs were fueled by greed. Some thought it was companies cutting bad workers or lowest performers. Some thought it was a move to boost stocks, which is strange since companies needing to lay people off usually doesn't inspire consumer confidence. While these are possible, or pieces in a larger puzzle, I get the feeling that for American companies, the new tax laws are the main impetus behind cutting good people in pretty good times. Why wouldn't this move more jobs to America and convince companies to hire fewer non Americans? And again, this is from the perspective of American companies. Let's do some math. Let's say that I pay an American engineer 150,000 American dollars per year, and let's say that I found an equally talented worker in another country for 100,000 a year. That's probably high, but we'll use it as a math example. I read that the 15-year amortization for foreigners is 3.33% per year for 15 years and 50% in year 16 if you're still in business. Under that new Section 174, in year 1, you could write off $15,000 for the American worker, leaving you with a potentially taxable $135,000. Or $3,330 for the foreign worker, leaving you with nearly $97,000 as potentially taxable. Hey, critical thinkers, which one looks better to you if you are a business number or finance person? If you're a company interested in cutting costs, getting good workers cheaper, and you don't care about where they're located because they somehow don't have to come into your Raleigh, North Carolina office like everybody else, the foreign worker is the better deal financially. You would have around $97,000 versus $135,000 of potentially taxable profit. Now multiply that across every job you can shift from on-site Americans to off-site people outside of America. I'm not making a statement about who should get jobs. That gets political fast. I'm only trying to envision this from the perspectives of the people who created this tax law change and the companies and workers affected by it. I don't believe this change will move significantly more jobs with American companies to or back to America. So in conclusion, the tax law didn't do what it claimed and caused many of our jobs to disappear or get rehired at lower pay. Get to know this tax law. It might explain a lot. A frightening amount of what's going on sucks, but makes more sense once you think about the much higher taxes business have to pay thanks to these changes. This business tax law change certainly didn't lower taxes for businesses and was likely designed to offset a tax cut for the rich that was part of the same law. I can't help but go a little deeper and ask this critical thinking question. Why would an American president want to see companies doing R&D, technology, experimentation, and innovation hurt by significantly higher taxes? Why would that person want to see those companies lose workers, do less, or possibly close down? Who wins or is made stronger when American innovation is taxed so high that it becomes weaker? Many American tech workers can't find a job. The jobs that are offered want them in the office, but pay way less than just a year or so ago. I hope that these tax law changes can be undone as soon as possible. Not just delayed, but undone. We now have over a year of proof of disastrous outcomes. What will be next is the larger economic slide when so many are out of work, spend less, or can't cover their normal everyday expenses. Okay, that is the article. Thanks for listening. We've got over 20 people on LinkedIn joining us live. I didn't check YouTube. And during that, Andre made a comment that said, yeah, I think some companies have defaulted on loans for their office spaces. It's cheaper. Yeah, I think in some cases, and it's really just a math puzzle, you have to do the math on what costs less. Defaulting on a lease, very often there's a penalty in that. Defaulting on a loan to purchase office space or trying to sell it, maybe even at a bit of a loss, versus whatever you were going to be taxed on that for the next possible X years. So it's a pretty interesting story, and it looks like it was really buried by the media. I can't say why. I'm not the media, but my guess would be because of how political it is. Oh, thank you, Saskia. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to YouTube CX-CC. I think it's because this is so political. This has to do with who you vote for, and this has to do with who you vote for at all levels. People in American Congress, which are the House of Representatives and the Senate, who is the president. The people, those are the people who come up with these types of laws that say, hey, you know what we should do? We should tax rich people less, and we should tax businesses more. Sounds good, right? Well, if you tax Microsoft more, they probably don't go ouch. But when you think about the larger landscape of businesses, this is devastating, just devastating. And Ana Lucia points out, add this tax with the massive inflation we're going through, and you just get poorer people. Exactly. And that's why something like this is likely to have shrapnel and further consequences when people can't pay their mortgage, can't pay their rent, can't pay for all kinds of things. And we know this is going on because if you spend even one day on LinkedIn, then you've probably seen messages from people who are saying, I can't find a job, I'm about to lose my house, or things like this. It's the most heartbreaking stuff ever. And why? We thought it was corporate greed, and maybe some of it is corporate greed, but I wonder how much of it is just businesses trying to save their butts and have money in the bank to pay these ridiculous taxes. Yes, Melanie's totally right. Melanie says it also accelerates companies' adoption of AI to replace people. It's amazing if we think about how fast AI has exploded, specifically with tools and products to replace people and workers' tasks. When I wrote my Customers Know You Suck book in 2022, I didn't even mention AI. I released this book in December 2022. If I were writing it right now, I would have a whole chapter on look out for crappy AI. I don't even think I mentioned AI because it just wasn't totally a thing. You know, you had a little chat GPT or a couple of fun things you could try out, and something would try to make some art for you, but it was pretty terrible. All of a sudden, boom. I really think that companies invested a lot of money in AI thinking, okay, we've got to do something that's going to replace people. Hi, Yuvra. Yuvra says, I have a feeling this has pushed more jobs out of the USA. I think so too. Even though foreign resources taxes are still intact, it's easier to replace one USA resource with 2 to 3 foreign remote resources. That's a great point that I didn't even make in my article. Thank you. I love my community's critical thinking. You're totally right. And in fact, we saw a little bit of that from one of those bizarre and unhinged articles from Jacob Nielsen, where he said, why don't you just replace an American with 2 Polish people? I think, was that what the article said? I didn't read it and I don't subscribe to his stuff, but someone sent it to me and I saw a piece of it and it was like, replace an American with 2 Polish people. And I was like, thing one, why are you advocating for replacing American people? Thing two, why'd you pick Poland, the whitest country on the planet, when there are so many talented UX people around the world? Brazil, Nigeria, India. Why'd you pick the whitest country. So that didn't feel good. And why wouldn't he say augment your team? For example, let's say we have a UX person on a team and we know they're not enough when we need to hire someone. Maybe the company feels like they can't afford an American, but maybe you can afford 3 Brazilians. Maybe you can afford 2 Croatians. I mean, to me, there should be enough pie to hire a diverse group. It doesn't have to be just Americans or just Indians or just anybody from any particular place. I think it's great to hire people from all of these places, and some people you'll pay more and some people you might pay less. But one interesting thing that we do at my company, Delta CX, is I pay everybody the same no matter where they're located. So, for example, on some of my projects, the more junior people got 50 American dollars an hour for their work. Okay, it's not the greatest pay on the planet, but it's all right, especially during the pandemic. But they got that whether they were in America or some other country. And I don't want to mess with people by saying, oh, you happen to live there, then you should make less. Or you happen to live somewhere else, you should make more. I think that if this is what this job pays, this is what this job should pay everybody. And it should be a good wage for everybody who's involved. Andre says it was also interesting to see the exclusions put in for some market research. Yeah, there are some tax credits you can get for R&D, but they're not much compared to the amount you're going to be stuck paying in taxes. So even a couple of those exclusions for the market research, I think, don't balance out. And sure, we could probably get away with calling UX research market research. Cool. Okay. That helps some of the researchers out there, but it's not going to necessarily help the designers, the content strategists, product managers, people, we weren't the only people being laid off. I think we felt like we were the bulk of people laid off, but people were laid off across technology. They were laid off at different levels. Vice presidents were laid off. People who had worked at a company for 20 years were laid off. Nobody was safe. And that was weird too. Ana Lucia says, I'm still thinking about how this wasn't talked about in the media. Businesses hurting and maybe even closing because of this ghost profit. Why? Yeah, I don't know. Some of the articles that I read said, we are scared to death of this and we can't get the media to pick it up. And I think it's because of how political it is. Because anybody who takes a look at this tax law might take a look at how did we get here? And then they're going to look at who came up with the tax law, who proposed it, who voted for it, who signed it into law. And, it's going to point some fingers at people in a certain political party. And some people are comfortable pointing those fingers and some people are not. Andre says, some exclusions to R&D, acquisition of another's patent, acquisition of improvement of depreciable property, post-production activities including routine quality control, consumer surveys, management studies, and efficiency studies, advertising or promotions, general and administrative activities like accounting, finance, and legal. Yeah. So they did amend it to say, well, we're not going to make you amortize these things that I just listed. Thank you, Andre, for that. Andre posted them in our Slack community. If you'd like to join our online communities, head on over. Oh, what am I pointing at today? It's missing. Oh, it's the other side. Sorry. deltacx.com/links will send you to our Slack and Discord communities. We've got both, and we welcome you in both. So I think because this was political, and I think because someone would have to ask questions like, where were economists to tell people this wasn't a good idea? Where were the futurists and economists and mathematicians and other people to say, wait a minute, if you do this, this is, oh, that was the gong. Well, we'll go a few more minutes. Where were the people to tell this political party of the potential damage? And then the question becomes, were there those people who warned this political party of that damage and they said, fine by us, or that's what we're going for, or who cares? So I think it gets into some nervous territory that's highly political that a lot of people in America are scared to talk about. It's scary. Not everybody wants to talk about Trump or Biden or this person or that party or that senator or that person. These conversations get ugly fast. Ana Lucia says, what should people do to try to change the situation? I'm guessing foreigners can't do a thing other than sharing this with everyone. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Foreigners can't do anything. This is definitely up to Americans, and it's really anyone who has the right to vote in America. And that does include me, because even though I am a full-time resident of Italy, I am still an American citizen, and I have been voting in every election since I left America, which was January 2018. I am registered in the state of Arizona, and Arizona allows me to vote by emailed PDF. It's actually pretty cool. And I get like one of those old color in the circles as a PDF. I bring it into Affinity Designer, hashtag not sponsored. I color in the circles, I digitally sign it, and I send it back. And they go, cool, your vote's been counted. So the mainly what we can do is vote and consider who we're voting for and why. And if we are happy with how representatives represent our interest and senators represent our interest and presidents represent our interest, then you want to vote for them. But if you're aware of this and if you're aware of how these types of changes, that a tax cut for the rich, that money has to be made up somewhere. And so who are we going to tax more? Well, we could tax the little guy more. They might not have it. Ooh, let's tax businesses. They're all fat cats, right? Not all of them are fat cats. Some of them are me and you. And startups. I read some articles when I was chasing this information down that there were medical technology startups who were supposed to now only like they were going to be taxed on their grant money. They were going to be taxed on all of their research and development, all of their expenses. Some of them had to shut down. Um, this isn't just a bunch of UX people making an app. Some of this was medical advances, because again, this when you read the way this is written, it's anything that has to do with research, development, experimentation, innovation, and software. Yeah, Andre says it's patents as well. That's right. So if you are trying to invent a new, better way to do something, that could even be medical, it could be aerospace. Again, I'm not an expert. I could be wrong, but that falls into this bucket. And so, yeah, so I think Yuvra is right. Who you going to call, as the old American song goes, which, funny enough, got sued for ripping off another American song. For those of you who didn't know, Ghostbusters was ripped off from "I Want a New Drug" by Huey Lewis and the News. Ana Lucia says, does this affect universities and university labs? Again, I'm not a tax expert. I would say probably, because anything in America that is seen as a business, I think technically a university still is a business. It may be a not-for-profit business. It may be a non-profit business. Sometimes a university is a profitable business. Sometimes a university in America is a religious business because it's associated with a religion or a church or something else. So I would probably guess that this is going to touch academia as well. Like I said, I read some articles where medical and med tech startups were saying, oh my gosh, we might have to shut down, or we might have to try to survive without grant money because the taxes on the grant money, we'd have to pay 90% of that grant money to the government in taxes. That doesn't help us. We might as well get no grant money. But then what do you do? So, yeah, I think this is a very large situation. And I think it did end up causing some ripple effects outside of the US where people saw, like, oh, look, companies are laying companies off and they can do just fine with fewer people. This must be a good thing to do. We'll try it too. Or companies are laying people off, and wow, their stock is going up. We should do that too. And I think it inspired some copycats, but I think people didn't really understand why it was being done. They thought it was greed or the little stock boost or something like that. And I think it's just more complicated than that. So there you go. There's some ideas. Again, I am not a tax expert. I apologize that I won't know everything. I might even have some things wrong here, but it's still worth Googling and reading. A lot of the things that I found when I Googled were big consulting companies writing articles and blog posts with some of their generic advice for their clients. Obviously, they want you to hire the big consulting company to help you weather this storm, but many of them wrote good SEO blog posts, and a lot of them had some really out there advice. I think the one that made me go like, wait a minute, what? One of the blog posts I read suggested if you are let's see if I can get this right. If you are an American company with a Canadian subsidiary, so the parent company is American, a sub company or division is Canadian. Uh, Chances are you're being paid by the American company in this case, and the American company has to, or even if you're being paid by the Canadian company, the American company now has to deal with and write off what the Canadian company is doing. The Canadian company is foreign, so it now has to be amortized over 16 years. And so the article said if you are an American company with a Canadian subsidiary, look into becoming a Canadian company with an American subsidiary. The switcheroo. And I was like, wow, yeah. Andre says, I think I saw that article. Ana Lucia says, I think most of the companies I saw laying off people had American offices. Yeah, that would make sense. Andre says, thanks for seeing this and putting together this article and stream. Yeah, sure. It's something we need to talk about more. And really, it's a call your representative, call your senator type of thing. The House of Representatives already voted to enact the new law, which would postpone this law. But the postponing is a little bit too little too late, especially since American taxes are due on Monday. And so, that's it for the 2023 tax year. We're too late to postpone for that. Maybe companies will get extensions and cross their fingers, but not good. I sent in my business taxes. So yeah, so Andre saying it was hilarious, but to me it was kind of mind-boggling some of the advice that I saw, like basically completely redoing your entire international business structure to become a Canadian company with an American subsidiary or division. That was just wild. And it really even made me think about my own businesses because I have both an American corporation and an Italian SRL, which is kind of like a limited liability company. And it's like, oh, wow. Okay, so I guess if I get work in America, it makes more sense to use the American company. But if I get work outside of America, it makes more sense to use the Italian company because I don't want to amortize stuff over 16 years. It was a lot. And basically, I'm just hoping that this will all go away. Andre says, first it was California to Texas, now it's going to be Texas to Canada. Oh my gosh. American jokes. Yeah, I don't even know what's going to be what, but I still agree with what Yuvra said earlier, which is that given the low rates of pay that we see many international people getting compared to common or average American salaries, especially in tech, I think a lot of the jobs will move outside of the US, even though they claimed this change in law was going to be to keep jobs in America and move jobs back to America because they thought that the 16-year amortization would inspire companies to not want to deal with that or whatever. But did no one do the math on that? There's so many questions here, and I think if the media really sunk their teeth into it, and I would love for them to interview the economists and mathematicians and labor experts and futurists who would be able to say, let's model what'll probably happen, when this is enacted. But my guess is that they did. My guess is that they enacted it. They modeled it and said, oh, this is going to be disastrous to Americans and to the American economy. And then someone said, well, then make it happen in 2022 so it looks like it's Biden's fault. Trump might be out of office by 2022. Someone else might be voted in, right? Because the next election would have been 2020 for a new president to start in 2021. This would have looked like it was caused immediately by that new president. Until somebody just Googles one document and sees that it was enacted in 2017. It was signed into law in 2017 to be enacted in 2022. So I can't, yeah, Ana Lucia says, I can't help but think it was somewhat malicious. I do too. I don't want to put on a tinfoil hat, but I do feel like it was very on purpose. I feel like it was to give a tax cut to the rich, to make it up off of nobody cared who, and then put into place in such a way that it would look like it was someone else's doing. And yeah, and that way this person can try to get back into power and say, look, this person hurt the economy and took your job. Look how much this person has mismanaged stuff. And if nobody goes and researches Section 174, then they think, yeah, Biden ruined all this. Look, as soon as Biden gets into office, there's all these layoffs. Oh my God, it's him. And I think it would be easy to think that if you didn't Google one piece of information. So, I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I don't feel like a conspiracy theorist, but I do feel like that's a possible way that this happened, and it's got reasonable motives. It seems like something somebody could do. Seems like it could have been stopped before it happened from either side. Yeah, and I didn't read enough on the history of the law to know how it went through. I didn't look at who voted for it, who voted against it, because all those are records on the Congress website. I didn't want to go into the rabbit hole any further. It was depressing enough, but sure, you could look at who voted for it, who voted against it, how was it debated, did anybody try to fight against it? We can look all those things up, but everything that I found made it seem like the media didn't want to talk about it. And I think that's because to me it looks like we'll set this up to help rich people be richer. We'll take it away from businesses. They've got extra money, right? Businesses, yeah, extra money. Why not? Um, and we'll make the next president look like they did the wrong thing so that we can get our party back in power and make it look like we're the heroes who will, and another interesting thing is that by enacting it in 2022, let's say Trump had won a second term in 2020, that would have meant that when he stayed in office in 2021, they could have quietly undone this or changed it, and then this wouldn't have happened because I get the feeling he wouldn't have wanted this to happen while he was president. He would want to make it look like someone else caused these problems. So it's really complicated. And of course, I'm just saying speculative, hypothetical things. I can't say for sure that's what he did or those were his motives. But if someone is super pro-Trump, then now they're going to be angry at me and feel that I'm wrong. And my thought is like, well, just look at the facts. But there's that's a messy word in America right now, which is also sad. Andre says, I thought about that too. Yeah, so Yeah, I think if you are a strong critical thinker and certainly fan of this channel, then you are thinking about these things. And even if we don't come to the same conclusions, I still appreciate that you are here and you're watching and you're interacting, and maybe you've thought about some of these things too. So, we've run a little late today, but thank you so much for joining. Thanks to the people who are still watching over on LinkedIn, YouTube, and maybe even someone on Twitch, who knows. And taking a look at our upcoming schedule, remember we've got a whole calendar of events that you can RSVP to and be reminded. So you're not waiting for me to tell you when something's going on. You can check the calendar yourself. Ana Lucia says, to be honest, I think we should share more about this more often to see if it reaches who it must reach, and maybe the media will end up talking about this. Oh, yes, I'm certainly not against talking about some hot topics, spicy topics, controversial topics, but I also get the feeling that most of the people involved in my community, not all, but most are probably not Trump voters. It's just a hypothesis that I have. I'm sure some are, or maybe they're leaving now. But that's just a hypothesis that I have. Can't prove it. So I can talk about it, but I'm not sure I'm reaching the people who need to be reconsidering how they vote or calling their senator right now. So let's see, looking at our schedule, hey, we've got our space workshop on Friday. I hope to see you there. I think we have 25 people signed up. If you would like to sign up for the space workshop, spots are still available, but it is a paid workshop. So you'll see it in the calendar at cxcc.to/events, and you can sign up for space if you would like to. And then let's take a look at next week. Tuesday will be Q&A AMA, as always, on Tuesday. Wednesday, I seem to have nothing planned, and Friday, yeah, next week actually looks really light. I think I had something planned for Monday and something planned for Wednesday, and I moved them into May. So next week's going to be light on the streams. So I hope you will join me Tuesday for the live Q&A, where I offer mentoring and help to everybody around the world. And you can send in your question, ahead of time if you'd like. deltacx.com/links will have a way for you to send in a question and get it answered for free. Ana Lucia says, I'll be sharing this video as soon as it's available to help out whoever I can. It's not much, but that's pretty much all I can do. Yeah, grab the URL right now because I'm going to make it unlisted because normally we share these to Patreon first. But if you can steal the URL now, even when I mark it unlisted, it'll still work. Unlisted. So thanks again for hanging out, everybody. Thanks for letting me run late on this one. I try not to go later than 45 minutes, but we've gone to 48. So let me wrap up the show, and I guess I will see everybody hopefully at the Space Workshop. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day or night.